In 1324, a man walked into Cairo with so much gold that he accidentally destroyed the Egyptian economy for a decade. He was not a conqueror. He was not at war. He was not trying to destabilize anyone. He was simply passing through on his way to Mecca. And his generosity was so extreme, his wealth so incomprehensible, that the gold markets of North Africa and the Middle East collapsed under the weight of it and did not recover for 12 years. Let that land for a moment. Elon Musk is worth somewhere north of $400 billion. Jeff Bezos built one of the most valuable companies in human history. The Rothschilds, at the peak of their 19th century dominance, controlled a significant fraction of European sovereign debt. None of them come close. Historians and economists who have attempted to calculate the wealth of Mansa Musa I, the ninth emperor of the Mali Empire, who ruled from 1312 to 1337, consistently arrive at the same conclusion. His fortune is incalculable, not in the sense that it was very large, in the literal sense that it exceeded the measurement frameworks available to modern economists. His wealth did not operate at the scale of an individual. It operated at the scale of an empire that controlled nearly half of the world's gold supply at a time when gold was the world's only real currency. He is, by the most careful historical analysis available, the richest human being who has ever lived. And almost nobody knows his name. Almost nobody knows his strategy. And almost nobody has extracted the 5 devastating wealth lessons buried inside his story. Lessons that apply with full force to the economy of 2026. That changes today. This is history's wealth playbook. And this is the Mansa Musa chapter. Section 1. The world. Mansa Musa ruled. And why most people have no idea how powerful it was. Before we talk about the pilgrimage and the gold and the crashed economies, we need to understand the architecture of what Mansa Musa actually controlled. Because the story most people know, the one with the camels and the gold dust and the generous emperor, is the surface. The structure underneath it is where the real lessons live. The Mali Empire at the height of Mansa Musa's reign was the largest empire in the world. It covered an area roughly equivalent to Western Europe. It stretched from the Atlantic coast in the west to the Great Bend of the Niger River in the east. It encompassed the territories of what are today Mali, Senegal, Gambia, Guinea, Niger, Nigeria, Chad, and Mauritania. But geography alone does not explain the wealth. What explains the wealth is what the geography sat on top of. The Mali Empire controlled 2 of the most valuable commodities in the medieval world, gold and salt. And it did not merely possess them, it monopolized the trade routes through which both commodities reached the rest of the known world. Gold came from the Bambouk and Bouré goldfields in the western and southern reaches of the empire. These were among the most productive gold deposits on the planet at the time. Estimates suggest that West Africa under the Mali Empire was producing between 300 and 500 tons of gold annually, supplying somewhere between 40 and 60% of the entire world's gold supply. Salt came from the Saharan salt mines, particularly the legendary deposits at Tagaza, a city in the middle of the desert where the buildings themselves were made of salt blocks because the material was so abundant. Salt in the medieval world was not a seasoning. It was a preservation technology. In an era before refrigeration, salt was the difference between a civilization that could store food through winter and one that could not. In some parts of sub-Saharan Africa, salt was worth its weight in gold, literally, traded gram for gram. And between the gold of the south and the salt of the north ran the trans-Saharan trade routes, the commercial arteries of the medieval world connecting West Africa to North Africa, the Middle East, and eventually Europe. The Mali Empire did not just sit along these routes. It controlled them. The great trading cities of the empire, Timbuktu, Jenne, Niani, were positioned precisely to function as choke points through which the wealth of the continent had to pass. This was not luck. This was strategic positioning at a continental scale. And it is the first and most important wealth lesson Mansa Musa's story teaches. Section 2. Lesson 1. The commodity monopoly is the oldest wealth strategy in history, before Rockefeller controlled oil, before Carnegie controlled steel, before the East India Company controlled spice routes. Before any of the wealth stories that dominate Western financial history, Mansa Musa was running the original resource monopoly playbook, and the structure of what he controlled maps precisely onto every great wealth concentration in history that followed him. Think about what a commodity monopoly actually does. It does not require you to be smarter than your competitors. It does not require you to outwork them. It does not require innovation or disruption in the modern sense. What it requires is that you control something the world needs, something that cannot easily be substituted, and that you position yourself as the unavoidable gatekeeper between the supply and the demand. When you control the only road between the gold mine and the market, everyone who wants gold pays you a toll. When you control the only salt deposits within 1,000 miles of civilizations that need salt to survive, those civilizations pay you whatever you ask. The leverage is structural, not personal. The wealth flows not because of daily effort, but because of position. Mansa Musa understood this at an imperial level. The Mali Empire's wealth was not built on conquest alone. It was built on the systematic identification and control of the resources and routes that the medieval world's economy required to function. Now translate this to the modern context. The principle is identical, even if the commodities have changed. In 2026, the commodities that function like medieval gold and salt are data, attention, and compute infrastructure. The platforms that control the routes through which those commodities flow, the search engines, the social networks, the cloud providers, the payment processors, are running the same playbook Mansa Musa ran in the 14th century. They do not produce the value that flows through their systems. They collect a toll on every transaction that uses their infrastructure. At the individual and small business level, the same principle applies. What scarce resource or critical capability sits inside your market? Who controls the route between the supply and the demand? Is there a gatekeeper position available that nobody has yet claimed? These are the questions that have generated the most durable wealth in every era of human history, starting with Mansa Musa and running in an unbroken line to the present day. Section 3. The 1324 Pilgrimage, the most economically consequential journey in history. In 1324, Mansa Musa made his Hajj, the Islamic pilgrimage to Mecca that is one of the 5 pillars of the faith. Every Muslim who is able is expected to make this journey at least once in their lifetime. Most rulers of his era would have made the journey with a modest retinue. A few hundred soldiers, some servants, enough provisions for the road. A demonstration of piety, not power. Mansa Musa made it with 60,000 people. Let that number be real for a moment. 60,000. His entourage included 12,000 slaves, each carrying 4 pounds of gold dust. It included 80 camels, each carrying between 50 and 300 pounds of gold. It included heralds, soldiers, merchants, officials, and a personal escort of 14,000 slaves dressed in Persian silk and brocade. The column stretched so far that travelers on the route reported that when the front of the procession had reached a city, the back was still days behind. As the procession moved through the western Sudan, through the Sahara, and into Egypt, Mansa Musa did something that seemed, on the surface, extraordinarily generous. He gave away gold, freely, continuously, to everyone he encountered. He gave it to the poor who lined the roads. He gave it to mosques and scholars along the route. In Cairo, where his procession stopped for 3 months, he spent and gave away so much gold that the local market was flooded with it. And that is where the economic catastrophe began. Gold, like any commodity, derives its value from scarcity. In the medieval monetary system, where gold was the primary currency, the price of goods and the purchasing power of money were directly tied to how much gold existed in circulation in a given region. When Mansa Musa arrived in Cairo with a quantity of gold that exceeded anything the Egyptian economy had seen, and then distributed it freely, he did not make Cairo richer. He made gold cheaper. And when gold became cheaper, the purchasing power of every gold coin in Egypt fell. Prices rose. The value of existing savings collapsed. The economists who have studied this event describe it as a 14th century hyperinflationary episode triggered by a sudden, massive increase in the gold money supply. The Egyptian economy did not fully recover for 12 years after Mansa Musa passed through. Later in his journey, Mansa Musa actually attempted to correct the damage. In the city of Medina, reportedly advised by his counselors, he began to borrow gold back from merchants along the route at high interest rates in order to reduce the supply he had injected into the market. He was, in the most literal sense, conducting medieval monetary policy, trying to reverse the inflationary effects of his own generosity. This episode contains within it the second devastating wealth lesson of the Mansa Musa story. Section 4, Lesson 2. Wealth without economic intelligence is a weapon pointed at yourself. Mansa Musa was, by any measure, extraordinarily generous. His distribution of gold along the pilgrimage route was an act of genuine religious piety and personal largesse. He was not trying to destabilize the economies of the regions he passed through. He was simply expressing his faith and his nature. But good intentions do not override economic reality. And the economic reality was that injecting a massive, sudden increase in gold supply into a monetary system built on gold's scarcity was going to have consequences, regardless of the motivation behind it. This is a lesson that maps directly onto the modern wealth landscape with uncomfortable precision. There are many people in the modern world who accumulate significant wealth through business success, inheritance, speculation, or any other means, without developing a corresponding understanding of how wealth functions at scale, how it moves, how it influences prices and systems, how deploying it in certain ways creates unintended consequences for themselves and for others. The most vivid modern example is lottery winners. Study after study shows that the majority of lottery winners who receive large sudden windfalls are worse off financially within 5 years than they were before winning. Not because money is bad, because they lacked the economic intelligence to deploy it in ways that preserved and grew its value. The wealth arrived. The framework to manage it did not. At a macro level, the same dynamic plays out in resource-rich nations that receive sudden commodity windfalls. The oil curse documented in dozens of developing countries where massive oil revenues triggered inflation, corruption, and economic dysfunction rather than development. The money was real. The understanding of how to channel it productively was absent. Mansa Musa had the richest empire in the world. He had the financial intuition to eventually try to correct the damage he had caused by borrowing back gold at interest. But the fundamental lesson his story leaves is this: the accumulation of wealth and the intelligence to deploy it responsibly are two entirely separate capabilities. Building one without the other is not wealth. It is a pressure system waiting to release. Section 5. Timbuktu. The greatest knowledge investment in medieval history. Here is the part of the Mansa Musa story that almost never gets told. And it is arguably the most important part. When Mansa Musa returned from his pilgrimage to Mecca, he brought back with him something more valuable than anything he had distributed along the route. He brought back the architect Abu Ishaq al-Sahili, one of the most celebrated designers in the Islamic world, along with a cohort of scholars, teachers, and intellectual figures from the great centers of Islamic learning. And he deployed them to transform Timbuktu. Under Mansa Musa's direction and financing, Timbuktu was rebuilt and expanded as a center of Islamic scholarship and learning. The Jinguereber Mosque, still standing today, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, was commissioned by Mansa Musa and designed by al-Sahili. The Sankore Mosque and University was developed into what became one of the greatest centers of learning in the medieval world. At its peak, the Sankore University in Timbuktu had an enrollment of 25,000 students. In a city with a total population of around 100,000, 1/4 of the entire population of Timbuktu was engaged in formal study. The University of Bologna, considered the oldest university in Europe, was founded in 1088. Oxford University was founded around 1096. Timbuktu's Sankore was operating as a major academic institution at roughly the same period. And while European universities of the era were centers of religious doctrine and basic philosophy, Sankore's curriculum included astronomy, mathematics, physics, law, history, geography, and the natural sciences. At the height of Timbuktu's scholarly golden age, the city held between 400,000 and 700,000 manuscripts, hand-copied scholarly texts covering every field of human knowledge available in the medieval world. Many of these manuscripts survive today in private collections and archives, still being cataloged and translated. This was not charity. This was not piety alone. This was a strategic infrastructure investment in the production of human capital and the accumulation of knowledge, the most durable form of wealth that exists. Section 6. Lesson 3. Invest in knowledge. Infrastructure, and you build a moat that outlasts gold. Mansa Musa understood something that most wealth builders in any era miss or underweight. Physical commodities, gold, oil, salt, land, are subject to depletion, disruption, and devaluation. The trans-Saharan trade routes could be rerouted. The gold mines could be exhausted. A military defeat could transfer physical assets to a conqueror. But knowledge infrastructure, universities, libraries, scholarly networks, accumulated intellectual capital, compounds differently. It attracts the most talented minds of a generation. Those minds produce further knowledge. That knowledge attracts more talent. The institution becomes a self-reinforcing system that generates value independent of the physical assets that originally funded it. Timbuktu's scholarly reputation outlasted the Mali Empire itself. Long after the political and military power of the Malian state had faded, Timbuktu remained one of the most important intellectual centers in the Islamic world. The manuscripts produced there were consulted, copied, and circulated across the African continent, the Middle East, and eventually Europe, for centuries after Mansa Musa's death. The investment Mansa Musa made in Timbuktu's knowledge infrastructure produced a return that compounded for 200 years beyond his lifetime. No gold mine produces a return like that. The modern translation of this lesson is one of the most consistently underrated wealth strategies available. Investment in knowledge, your own, your organizations, your communities, compounds in ways that financial investment cannot fully replicate. The individual who invests seriously in rare, high-value skills accumulates a form of human capital that is deeply personal, not easily copied, and extraordinarily durable as a source of income and leverage. The organization that builds a culture of genuine learning and intellectual development creates a talent magnet, attracting and retaining the kind of people whose work compounds the organization's competitive position over time. The community or institution that invests in education builds a foundation of human capability that generates economic value across generations. Mansa Musa built Timbuktu into the knowledge capital of the medieval world. He understood, at a level most modern wealth builders do not, that the deepest moat is not built from gold. It is built from the minds that gold can attract and develop. Section 7. The Pilgrimage as Soft Power. How Mansa Musa put Africa on the map of the world. There is a map. It was drawn in 1375 by a Majorcan cartographer named Abraham Cresques. It is called the Catalan Atlas, and it is one of the most important geographical documents of the medieval world, a state-of-the-art representation of the known world at the time of its creation. In the center of the African continent on that map, there is an illustration of a black king seated on a golden throne, holding a golden scepter in one hand and a golden orb in the other. The figure is crowned in gold. Below the illustration, the cartographer wrote, in Catalan, the language of the Mediterranean trading world, words that translated to say that this lord is the richest and most noble king in all the land. That figure is Mansa Musa, and his appearance on the Catalan Atlas, the most sophisticated map in Europe at the time, is a direct consequence of the 1324 pilgrimage. Before the pilgrimage, the Mali Empire was essentially invisible to the European and Middle Eastern worlds. The trans-Saharan trade routes brought West African gold to North Africa and the Mediterranean, but the source of that gold, the empire that produced and controlled it, was largely unknown. It was a rumor, a legend, a vague reference in Arabic geographical texts. After the pilgrimage, it was on the map, literally and figuratively. Arab scholars who encountered the procession wrote detailed accounts of what they had seen. These accounts circulated through the Islamic intellectual networks that connected Cairo, Baghdad, Mecca, and the great cities of North Africa. European merchants and explorers read the Arabic accounts in translation. The story of the African emperor with inconceivable wealth spread across the Mediterranean world and eventually reached the courts of Portugal and Spain. where it contributed to the growing European fascination with finding direct sea routes to the source of West African gold. The argument can be made that Mansa Musa's 1324 pilgrimage was one of the indirect catalysts for the age of exploration. The European desire to reach the source of African gold, to bypass the Arab middlemen who controlled the trans-Saharan routes, was part of what drove Portuguese explorers down the West African coast and eventually around the Cape of Good Hope. The gold that Columbus promised to his Spanish sponsors was partly inspired by the legend of Musa's wealth. The richest man in history accidentally set in motion the events that would lead to the end of the world order his empire dominated. Section 8. Lesson 4. Visibility is a double-edged sword. This is the most complicated lesson in the Mansa Musa story, and the one most relevant to modern wealth builders. The pilgrimage was, from one perspective, a masterwork of what we would today call personal branding and soft power projection. By making his procession so extraordinary, so visually overwhelming, so generous, so unlike anything anyone along the route had ever seen, Mansa Musa transformed the Mali Empire from an unknown regional power into a global legend. The diplomatic and commercial benefits were real. Timbuktu attracted scholars, merchants, and diplomats from across the Islamic world in the decades after the pilgrimage. The empire's reputation for wealth and stability made it a preferred trading partner and a respected diplomatic actor. But the same visibility that created those benefits also created the dangers. Once Europe knew where the gold was, the impulse to go and get it directly, rather than trading for it through Arab intermediaries, became a driving force in European geopolitical strategy. The Portuguese exploration of the West African coast, which began in earnest in the 1440s, was motivated in significant part by the desire to access the source of the wealth that Mansa Musa had put on the map. The lesson here is not that Mansa Musa was wrong to make the pilgrimage, or wrong to be visibly wealthy. The lesson is about the management of visibility, understanding that the same demonstration of wealth and power that builds your reputation and attracts allies also attracts competitors, rivals, and those who would prefer to take rather than trade. This dynamic is as real in 2026 as it was in 1324. The individual or institution that achieves significant wealth or success faces a version of this choice continuously. How much visibility to pursue? How much of the source of the advantage to expose? How to project strength without simultaneously providing a detailed map to those who might prefer to compete or extract rather than collaborate. The most sophisticated wealth builders in any era manage their visibility strategically, projecting enough to attract the right relationships and opportunities, while maintaining enough opacity about the mechanics of their advantage to protect it. Mansa Musa projected everything. The world saw the gold, the retinue, the generosity, the power, and the world eventually came to find its source. Section 9. The Decline and Lesson 5. What happens when the infrastructure owner stops defending the infrastructure? After Mansa Musa's death in 1332 or 1337, the historical sources disagree on the exact date. The Mali Empire entered a period of gradual decline. Within a generation of his death, the empire was losing territory to the rising Songhai Empire to the east and to Tuareg raiders from the north. By the 15th century, the political and military power of the Mali state had fragmented significantly. The gold mines still produced. The trade routes still ran. The wealth was still there, in the ground and in the geography. But the empire that had controlled and defended the infrastructure of that wealth was weakening. And here is what happened to the gold routes when the Mali Empire could no longer defend them. Other powers moved in. The Songhai Empire, under Sunni Ali and later Askia Muhammad, captured Timbuktu in 1468 and built their own successor empire on the same foundations Mansa Musa had established. The same trade routes, the same gold, the same salt, the same gatekeeper position. They ran the same playbook because the playbook was still valid. The infrastructure was still there. The defender of the infrastructure had changed. Then, in 1591, a Moroccan army equipped with firearms, technology that had not existed when the Mali and Songhai empires were built, crossed the Sahara and shattered the Songhai army at the Battle of Tondabi. The firearms were so decisive against an army that had no equivalent technology that the entire military and political order of the Western Sudan collapsed within a generation. The trans-Saharan gold trade did not recover as a dominant force in the global economy. The Portuguese had by this time established sea routes along the West African coast that bypassed the Saharan overland routes entirely. The economic geography that had made the Mali Empire's gatekeeper position so extraordinarily valuable had been permanently rerouted around. The fifth and final lesson of the Mansa Musa story is the most sobering. Section 10. Lesson 5. No position is permanent. Every moat requires active defense and adaptation. The Mali Empire's wealth was built on the control of specific trade routes and specific commodity deposits in a specific era of global commerce. Those routes and those commodities were genuinely the most valuable things in the world at the time. And the empire that controlled them accumulated the greatest fortune in human history. But the world changed. Technology changed. Sea routes made overland Saharan routes obsolete. Firearms made traditional military defense of the empire's territory impossible without equivalent technology. The economic geography that had made the gatekeeper position so valuable was permanently redrawn. And the Mali Empire, which had built its wealth on a position rather than on adaptability, could not survive the redrawing of the map. This is the pattern that repeats in every era of business and financial history. The company that builds a dominant position in a market and then stops defending and adapting that position eventually finds the market reorganized around it. The individual who builds wealth through a specific skill or advantage in a specific market is only safe as long as that market continues to value that specific advantage. In 2026, this lesson is not historical curiosity. It is urgent. The professional whose skills were developed for an economy that artificial intelligence is restructuring is living the Mali Empire's situation in real time. The business whose distribution model was built for a pre-digital commerce environment is watching its trade routes get rerouted. The industry whose economic geography was drawn before the current wave of technological disruption is experiencing the 1591 Battle of Tondibi, a technological shift so decisive that the existing order cannot survive it without fundamental transformation. The response that works is not nostalgia for the position that was. It is the ruthless, continuous reinvestment in understanding the new map, identifying where the new choke points will be, what the new scarce resources are, where the new infrastructure will run, and moving to control those positions before the next Songhai or the next Portuguese navigator does it first. Mansa Musa controlled half the world's gold supply. His empire lasted a century after him before it began to fail. The trade routes he controlled were rerouted by technology and geopolitics within 2 centuries of his death. The manuscripts of Timbuktu, the knowledge infrastructure he built, survived 500 years and are still being studied today. Of everything he built, the knowledge infrastructure was the most durable. That is the final lesson. And it may be the most important one. Closing, let me leave you with the image that began this video. A man walks into Cairo in 1324 with 60,000 people and so much gold that he breaks the economy of the most sophisticated city in the medieval world, simply by being generous. Economists cannot fully calculate his wealth. Historians struggle to find comparisons. The map of the known world was redrawn because of him. The course of European exploration was altered because of him. The greatest university in African history was built because of him. And most people, if you ask them right now to name the richest human being who has ever lived, would say, Elon Musk. The wealth of Mansa Musa I is not a footnote in financial history. It is a masterclass. It contains more insight about resource control, knowledge investment, soft power, the dangers of visibility, and the necessity of adaptation than most modern business schools teach in 4 years. His story was buried. His lessons were lost. Today we recovered them. He controlled half the world's gold. He built the greatest library in medieval history. He accidentally crashed 3 economies with his generosity. And he left behind a playbook that still runs, if you know how to read it. That is history's wealth playbook. I will see you in the next one.